Before we begin, if you want the full continuation of these stories, more uncensored 18+ Ancient BL content, extended scenes, and unlimited royal forbidden romance, you can join us on Patreon at SpicyAncientBL. YouTube does not allow us to show or monetize everything freely here, so the deeper and more intense versions are waiting for you there. You can find the link in the description and pinned comment. Have you ever looked at your life, taken a deep breath, and realized you made exactly one wrong turn that led to absolute, undeniable ruin? For Ren Zhelan, that realization came on a Tuesday, face down on a solid oak desk, surrounded by 74 scrolls of unpaid debt. His cheek was stained with wet ink, the room was freezing, and a half-finished cup of cheap green tea sat dangerously close to his elbow. He didn't move. He didn't even breathe. He just let the silence of the desolate room wash over him, praying to whatever ancient gods were listening that the floor would simply open up and swallow him whole. "I used to be a military genius," Zhelan muttered to the empty room, his voice muffled by the wood. "I used to command armies. I calculated the supply lines for the northern campaign. And now I am calculating the price of peacock food." As if summoned by the very mention of his misery, the heavy wooden doors of the study burst open. "Zhelan! Zhelan! We have a crisis!" Zhelan did not lift his head. He merely closed his eyes as the fifth prince of the empire, Prince Jin, sprinted into the room. Prince Jin was, by all accounts, a devastatingly handsome man. He had the sharp, aristocratic features of the royal bloodline, flowing silk robes that cost more than a small village, and the delicate, helpless aura of a kicked puppy. He was also, without a doubt, the single most incompetent human being to ever walk the earth. "My prince," Zhelan said, his voice completely deadpan, still speaking to the desk. "If the crisis is that you accidentally bought another exotic animal with our winter coal budget, I am going to respectfully resign by throwing myself into the lotus pond." Prince Jin froze. He looked at Zhelan, then he looked at the ground. It wasn't an exotic animal this time. Zhelan slowly peeled his face off the desk. He glared at the prince with dark, exhausted eyes. "What did you do?" "I may have accidentally bet the estate's entire monthly allowance on a cricket fight." Zhelan stared at him. The silence stretched so long that outside, a crow cawed in the courtyard. "A cricket fight," Zhelan repeated slowly, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "He was a very strong cricket, Zhelan. They called him the Iron Mandible. How was I supposed to know he would get intimidated and run away?" Zhelan rubbed his temples, feeling a migraine pulsing behind his eyes. This was his life now. 3 years ago, Zhelan's noble family had been falsely accused of treason. They were stripped of their titles, their wealth, and their military power. Zhelan, once the most promising young strategist in the capital, had been sold off to pay the family's debts. Through a stroke of terrible luck, he was purchased by the fifth prince to be his head secretary. Prince Jin wasn't cruel. In fact, he was incredibly kind. But he had the financial literacy of a toddler and the survival instincts of a decorative houseplant. "My prince," Zhelan said, standing up and straightening his plain, gray secretary robes. "Do you know what happens when an imperial estate goes bankrupt? The emperor does not just scold you. The royal court audits you. And do you know who conducts the audits?" Prince Jin paled dramatically, grabbing a chair for support. "No, not him. Zhelan, you have to fix this. The regent will kill me. He'll actually kill me." At the mention of the regent, even Zhelan felt a cold chill run down his spine. Yan Wuyong, the crown regent, known across the empire as the Blood Regent. He wasn't just a royal, he was a walking nightmare. When the old emperor fell ill, Yan Wuyong took control of the court. He was merciless, cold-blooded, and terrifyingly perceptive. He purged corrupt officials with a smile, executing ministers before they even finished their morning tea. But worst of all, rumors said Yan Wuyong possessed a terrifying, almost demonic intuition. He could look into a man's eyes and know, instantly and flawlessly, if he was lying. You could not deceive the Blood Regent. He saw through flattery, he saw through fear, and he saw through every political scheme. "Fine," Zhelan snapped, his old military instincts finally kicking in. He grabbed a fresh brush and slammed a blank scroll onto the desk. "If I have to drag this estate out of ruin to save my own neck, I will. But from now on, I am in charge of the finances. Every coin, every grain of rice. Do you understand?" Prince Jin nodded furiously, tears of gratitude in his eyes. "Yes, anything. Zhelan, you are my savior. You are a god among men. I am a man who wants to sleep for 8 hours, which I haven't done since I met you," Zhelan replied coldly. "Now go away. I have to figure out how to sell a royal peacock on the black market." Over the next 2 months, Zhelan became a terror. He fired half the lazy servants. He cut off the prince's allowance. He negotiated aggressive trade deals with local merchants, using his intimidating military aura to bully them into better prices. He turned the estate's massive, useless flower gardens into profitable herbal medicine farms. Within 60 days, the fifth prince's estate wasn't just out of debt, it was the most profitable royal household in the capital. And naturally, that kind of sudden, impossible competence attracted the worst kind of attention. The summons arrived on a rainy Thursday. An ornate, gold-trimmed envelope bearing the black dragon seal of the regent. The entire estate fell into a dead panic. Prince Jin cried for an hour. Zhelan simply stared at the letter, drank a very large cup of wine, and prepared to meet his doom. The royal banquet was a suffocating display of wealth and terror. Zhelan stood quietly behind Prince Jin's seat, keeping his head lowered, observing the room. The golden pillars, the silk drapery, the smell of roasted meats and heavy incense. It all felt like a beautiful, gilded cage. And then, the room went entirely silent. The musicians stopped playing. The dancers stepped back, lowering their heads to the floor. He had arrived. Yan Wuyong, the Blood Regent, walked into the great hall. Zhelan's breath caught in his throat. He had expected a monster. He had expected a grizzled, terrifying warlord. He did not expect this. Yan Wuyong was, quite frankly, offensively attractive. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and moved with the predatory grace of a snow leopard. He wore pitch-black robes heavily embroidered with crimson lotuses and silver thread. His long dark hair was half-tied in an intricate silver crown, and his face looked like it was carved from cold white jade by an artist who specialized in breaking hearts. His eyes were dark, sharp, and utterly devoid of warmth. Zhelan swallowed hard. He lowered his eyes immediately to the floor, but inside his head a voice screamed, "Oh no, why is he hot? That is completely unfair. He kills people for fun. He shouldn't have a jawline that could cut glass." Wuyong sat gracefully at the head table. He didn't speak immediately. He just let his dark eyes sweep over the terrified ministers and princes. Every person in the room was sweating, desperately hoping the regent wouldn't look at them. Every person except Zhelan, whose brain was currently misfiring. Look at those hands, Zhelan thought involuntarily, staring at the regent's long, pale fingers as he lifted a cup of wine. Those are the hands of a man who could easily choke someone out, or do other things. Stop it, Zhelan. You are going to get executed for treasonous thoughts. Suddenly, the regent's hand stopped midair. He didn't drink, he just froze. Slowly, methodically, Yan Wuyong turned his head. His dark, piercing gaze swept across the room, bypassing the shivering ministers, bypassing the sweating generals, and landing directly on Prince Jin's table. Directly on Zhelan. Zhelan's heart stopped. Why is he looking at me? Did my brain just broadcast my inappropriate thoughts? Is that his secret power? No, magic isn't real. He's just looking at the prince. Prince Jin, the regent's voice rang out. It was a low, smooth baritone that sent a shiver straight down Zhelan's spine. The kind of voice that made you want to kneel immediately. Prince Jin jolted so hard he nearly knocked over his soup. Yes, your highness. Your estate, Wuyong said lazily, resting his chin on his hand, though his eyes never left Zhelan. It has seen quite a remarkable turnaround this season. Tell me, how did a prince who recently bet 500 gold taels on a cricket manage to restructure an entire agricultural trade route? Prince Jin began to sweat profusely. Well, it was a matter of deep reflection, your highness. I realized my errors and applied myself to the study of commerce. It was a blatant lie. Everyone in the room knew it. The regent's eyes narrowed slightly, a dangerous, mocking light flickering in the dark depths. Is that so? Wuyong murmured. He slowly stood up. The entire hall stopped breathing. The regent walked down the steps, his black and crimson robes dragging silently across the marble floor. He stopped right in front of Prince Jin's table, but he wasn't looking at the prince. He was looking directly into Zhelan's eyes. "And who," the regent asked softly, "is this?" Prince Jin stuttered. "That is my secretary, your highness. Ren Zhelan. He is merely a servant." "A servant?" Wuyong repeated. He tilted his head, studying Zhelan the way a hawk studies a rabbit. Only, Zhelan didn't feel like a rabbit. He felt a weird, reckless spark of defiance in his chest. "Tell me, Ren Zhelan," the regent said, his voice dropping to a dangerous, intimate volume that only their table could hear. "Did your master truly restructure his estate through deep reflection?" Zhelan knew about the regent's intuition. He knew the man could smell a lie from a mile away. He also knew that lying right now would mean death. So Zhelan looked up. He met the terrifying, beautiful eyes of the Blood Regent, and he spoke the absolute truth. No, Your Highness, Zhelan said flatly. My prince is an idiot. He doesn't know the difference between a trade route and a hole in the ground. I restructured the estate, because if I didn't, he was going to sell my bed to pay for peacock food, and I am very fond of sleeping. The entire hall gasped collectively. Prince Jin looked like his soul had just left his body. Several ministers covered their faces, waiting for the blood to spray. The regent stared at Zhelan. The silence was deafening. Wuyong's dark eyes searched Zhelan's face, looking for the lie, looking for the flattery, looking for the fear. He found none of it. He only found absolute, irritated, exhausted honesty. Slowly, the corners of the regent's lips twitched. Then Yan Wuyong laughed. It wasn't a loud laugh, but a low, dark chuckle that vibrated in his chest. The sound was so shocking that an old minister in the back row actually fainted. Remarkable, Wuyong whispered, leaning in slightly closer. The scent of sandalwood and something distinctly metallic, like cold steel, washed over Zhelan. You have absolutely no sense of self-preservation, do you? I have excellent self-preservation, Your Highness, Zhelan replied, his heart hammering in his chest despite his calm face. Which is why I am telling you the truth. Also, you are standing very close, and it is making me extremely nervous. Wuyong's eyes darkened with a sudden, intense amusement. Nervous? You don't look nervous. I am screaming internally, Zhelan said with a completely straight face. The regent smiled, a real, genuine, dangerous smile that made Zhelan's breath hitch. We will speak again, Ren Zhelan, very soon. Wuyong turned and walked back to his throne, leaving Zhelan standing there, realizing with absolute horror that he hadn't just survived the encounter. He had accidentally made himself the regent's new favorite toy. And if you are enjoying this forbidden royal tension, remember, the extended and uncensored 18+ continuation is available on Patreon at SpicyAncientBL. The link is in the description and pinned comment. The next day, before the sun had even fully risen, a squad of imperial guards arrived at the fifth prince's estate. They didn't come with swords drawn, they came with a carriage. Zhelan was informed that his debt had been transferred. He no longer belonged to the fifth prince. He was now the personal secretary to the Blood Regent. When Zhelan stepped into the regent's private study in the central palace, the atmosphere was suffocatingly heavy. The room was massive, lined with thousands of scrolls, illuminated by flickering candles. Yan Wuyong sat behind a massive ebony desk, reading a military report. He had taken off his heavy outer robes, wearing only a dark silk inner layer that clung to his broad chest in a way that should have been illegal. You're late, Wuyong said, not looking up. I had to pack my things, Your Highness, Zhelan replied, standing stiffly by the door. All three of them. Wuyong finally looked up, resting his chin on his steepled fingers. Come here. Zhelan walked slowly to the desk. He stood there, keeping his hands clasped behind his back, desperately trying to keep his eyes on the regent's face and not on the slight opening of his silk collar. You intrigue me, Ren Zhelan, Wuyong said softly, his voice echoing in the quiet room. I have a gift, you see. I know when people lie. It is a curse, truly. For 10 years, I have not heard a single completely honest sentence in this palace. Everyone lies. They lie to flatter me. They lie to hide their treason. They lie because they are terrified. Wuyong stood up, walking slowly around the desk, until he was standing just inches in front of Zhelan. Zhelan had to tilt his head up to meet his gaze. But you, Wuyong whispered, his dark eyes tracing Zhelan's features. You do not lie. I watched you last night. I listened to your heartbeat. I watched your eyes. You spoke the absolute unvarnished truth. It's a character flaw, Zhelan muttered. My mother always told me I lacked a polite filter. I don't want a polite filter, Wuyong said, stepping even closer. The heat radiating from his body was intoxicating. I want to know if you can keep it up. Tell me, Zhelan, what are you thinking right now? The truth. Zhelan swallowed. He looked at the regent. He looked at the dangerously handsome face, the dark eyes, the soft lips. His military mind told him to retreat, to play it safe, to say something neutral. But his curse of brutal honesty, mixed with his sleep-deprived recklessness, took over. I am thinking, Zhelan said, his voice surprisingly steady, that you brought me here to intimidate me, but unfortunately, I am too distracted by the fact that you smell incredibly good, and I am currently calculating the exact distance between our mouths and wondering what would happen if I closed it. Silence. Absolute crushing silence. Zhelan squeezed his eyes shut. Well, it was a good run. I'm going to be beheaded in the morning. At least I won't have to do the budget anymore. But he didn't feel a sword at his neck. Instead, He felt a warm, strong hand gently grip his jaw. Zhelan's eyes snapped open. Wuyong was looking at him, and the expression on the regent's face was one of pure, unadulterated fascination. "Is that so?" Wuyong murmured, his thumb lightly brushing against Zhelan's lower lip. The touch sent a shockwave of electricity straight to Zhelan's core. "Yes," Zhelan whispered, entirely unable to move. "If you close that distance," Wuyong said, his voice dropping an octave, heavy with dark promise, "I would not stop you. But I would not let you pull away either. Do you understand?" Zhelan's breath hitched. I think I need to start organizing your files now." Wuyong chuckled, a soft, breathless sound, and finally released his jaw. "Go ahead, Zhelan. The files are on the left. But do not think you can run from me so easily." And so began the most stressful, exhausting, and agonizingly sensual period of Zhelan's life. Working for the Blood Regent was completely different from working for the idiot prince. Wuyong was brilliant. He worked late into the night, managing the entire empire's armies, taxes, and laws. But he demanded Zhelan's presence at all times. Zhelan became his shadow. He stood by him in court, poured his tea, organized his military strategies, and spent countless late nights alone with him in the dimly lit study. The tension between them grew so thick it could be cut with a sword. Wuyong loved to test Zhelan. He seemed addicted to Zhelan's honesty. In a world full of fake smiles and political poison, Zhelan's blunt, sarcastic, and occasionally highly inappropriate truthfulness became the regent's only comfort. During long council meetings, when a minister was droning on about a fake famine, Wuyong would lean over to Zhelan and whisper, "What do you think, my secretary?" And Zhelan, standing perfectly straight with a blank expression, would whisper back, "I think he is lying, he is embezzling funds, and his mustache is completely asymmetrical." Wuyong would have to cough into his silk sleeve to hide his laughter, much to the absolute horror of the court, who had never seen the Blood Regent display anything resembling joy. But it wasn't just jokes. The physical proximity was driving Zhelan insane. One rainy night, the palace was quiet. The heavy drumming of rain against the wooden roof was the only sound in the massive study. Zhelan was sitting on the floor by a low table, cross-referencing military supply lists. He didn't notice Wuyong walking up behind him until he felt a heavy, warm weight drape over his shoulders. Zhelan froze. The regent had taken off his own outer robe and draped it over Zhelan. Then, before Zhelan could say anything, Wuyong sat down directly behind him. He wrapped one arm loosely around Zhelan's waist and rested his chin heavily on Zhelan's shoulder. Zhelan stopped breathing. The scent of sandalwood and Wuyong's natural heat completely enveloped him. He could feel the solid, muscular chest pressing against his back. "Your Highness," Zhelan managed to squeak out, his hands trembling slightly over the parchment. "What are you doing?" "I am tired," Wuyong murmured, his deep voice vibrating right against Zhelan's ear. It sent a shiver straight down Zhelan's spine. "My head aches. Read the report to me." "I cannot read the report," Zhelan said honestly. "Why not?" "Because your hand is resting directly on my hip, and my brain has completely forgotten how to process the written word." Wuyong laughed softly against his neck. The warm breath fanning over Zhelan's skin was pure torture. "You are so honest, Zhelan. It is the most beautiful thing about you." The regent's arm tightened around his waist, pulling him back flush against his chest. "Tell me another truth. Tell me you want me to let go." Zhelan closed his eyes. The rain fell harder outside. The candlelight flickered, casting long, dancing shadows across the room. He felt the terrifying, overwhelming weight of the regent's power, but underneath it, he felt the exhaustion of a man who carried the world alone, a man who just wanted someone to be real with him. "I don't," Zhelan whispered into the quiet room. "I don't want you to let go. But if you keep doing this, I am going to cross a line, and you are going to execute me. I would burn this empire to the ground before I let anyone harm you," Wuyong said, his voice suddenly losing all its teasing lightness, replaced by a dark, possessive intensity. He turned his head, pressing a soft, lingering kiss against the sensitive skin just below Zhelan's ear. Zhelan gasped, his hands gripping the edge of the table. Every nerve in his body was on fire. He turned his head slightly, and his lips brushed against Wuyong's cheek. The air in the room felt suffocatingly hot, heavy with unsaid words and forbidden desire. They stayed like that for hours, wrapped in the quiet darkness, the line between master and servant blurring into something dangerously intimate. But a romance in the imperial court is never allowed to bloom in peace. 3 weeks later, the regent attended the annual spring hunt. It was a massive political event in the royal forests. Zhelan rode beside him, wearing the dark riding clothes of the regent's personal retinue. The air was crisp, the woods thick with pine trees. Wuyong looked magnificent on horseback, a dark bow slung over his shoulder, his eyes sharp and alert. But Zhelan, with his old military instincts, felt a wrongness in the air. The woods were too quiet. "Your Highness," Zhelan said softly, urging his horse closer to Wuyong's. "The birds have stopped singing. There are no animal tracks here. We are being funneled into a valley." Wuyong's eyes narrowed. He trusted Zhelan's mind implicitly. "An ambush?" Before Zhelan could answer, the sharp whistle of an arrow tore through the air. "Get down!" Zhelan shouted. He didn't think. He simply threw himself off his horse, tackling Wuyong right out of the saddle, just as a volley of black-fletched arrows struck exactly where the regent had been sitting. They hit the dirt hard, rolling into the thick brush. The sound of shouting and clashing steel erupted as the regent's guards were swarmed by assassins dressed in black. Wuyong was up instantly, drawing his heavy silver sword with a terrifying cold fury. He was a master swordsman, moving with brutal efficiency, cutting down the first two assassins who rushed them. But there were too many. Zhelan grabbed a fallen sword from the ground. He hadn't fought in years, but muscle memory took over. He stood back to back with the regent, parrying strikes, anticipating the enemy's movements. "You didn't tell me you could use a sword," Wuyong shouted over the clash of metal, sounding dangerously thrilled. "I was a military strategist, you idiot. I didn't just read books," Zhelan yelled back, ducking under a blade and driving the hilt of his sword into an assassin's chest. An archer in the trees aimed directly at Wuyong's exposed back. Zhelan saw it out of the corner of his eye. There was no time to shout, no time to block. Zhelan threw himself in front of Wuyong. The arrow grazed his upper arm, tearing through the fabric and slicing deep into his shoulder. The pain was blinding, hot and sharp, but it didn't hit anything vital. Zhelan hit the ground with a grunt. Wuyong turned. When he saw the blood on Zhelan's sleeve, something inside the Blood Regent snapped. The air grew freezing cold. Wuyong's eyes went completely black. He didn't just fight the remaining assassins, he slaughtered them. It was a terrifying display of raw, unrestrained violence. Within seconds, the clearing was dead silent, save for the heavy breathing of the regent. Wuyong dropped his sword and dropped to his knees beside Zhelan. His hands, usually so steady, were trembling as he gripped Zhelan's uninjured arm. "Zhelan," Wuyong breathed, his voice cracking. "Zhelan, look at me." "I'm fine," Zhelan winced, clutching his bleeding shoulder. "It's just a graze." "You're ruining your dramatic panic over a flesh wound." "Do not joke," Wuyong snarled, though there was absolute terror in his eyes. He ripped a strip of fabric from his own luxurious inner robe and pressed it hard against Zhelan's arm to stop the bleeding. "You threw yourself in front of an arrow for me, you fool, you brilliant, absolute fool." Zhelan looked up at him. Wuyong's face was pale, his dark hair falling wildly around his face, entirely stripped of his regal composure. He looked human, he looked vulnerable. "I am underpaid for this," Zhelan breathed, leaning his head back against the dirt. Wuyong let out a shaky, breathless laugh. He leaned down, his forehead resting gently against Zhelan's. The smell of pine, sweat, and blood surrounded them. "I will give you the world," Wuyong whispered fiercely, his lips hovering just inches from Zhelan's. "I will give you everything. Just don't ever do that again." "I can't promise that," Zhelan whispered back. "I told you, I don't lie. If someone tries to hurt you, I will stand in front of you every single time." Wuyong let out a low groan, a sound of absolute defeat and overwhelming desire. He didn't hold back anymore. He closed the distance, pressing his lips desperately against Zhelan's. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was bruised, frantic, and tasting of copper and adrenaline. Zhelan's good arm reached up, his hand tangling in the regent's dark hair, pulling him closer. Wuyong's hand cradled the back of Zhelan's head, his thumb stroking his jaw, pouring every ounce of his hidden loneliness, his fear, and his burning affection into the kiss. For the first time in his life, Ren Zhelan didn't think about his debts. He didn't think about the imperial budget. He didn't think about the danger of loving a tyrant. He just kissed him back, letting the heat of the Blood Regent burn away the coldness in his own heart. When they finally pulled apart, both of them breathing heavily, Wuyong stared down at him with eyes full of a dark, possessive promise. "You are mine now," Wuyong whispered, his voice shaking with intensity. "The debts are gone. The past is gone. You belong to me, Ren Zhelan, and I will never let you go." Zhelan smiled, a tired, genuine smile. "I know, and surprisingly, I don't want to run anymore." When they returned to the capital, the political landscape shifted immediately. The assassination attempt gave the regent the excuse he needed to completely purge the opposing noble factions. But the court noticed something else. The Blood Regent was no longer a solitary monster. Beside him, at all times, stood Ren Zhelan, now wearing the dark crimson robes of the Grand Royal Advisor. He no longer stood in the shadows, he stood directly at Wuyong's right hand. They ruled the court with terrifying efficiency. Wuyong could detect every lie, and Zhelan had the strategic genius to trap the liars before they could even speak. They were an unstoppable, formidable pair. But what the court didn't see were the quiet nights in the imperial study. They didn't see the feared Blood Regent sitting on a low couch, his head resting in Zhelan's lap, his eyes closed as Zhelan gently stroked his dark hair, reading trade reports out loud. They didn't see the way Wuyong would pull Zhelan down by the collar, interrupting a lecture on agricultural taxes with a deep, lingering kiss that left Zhelan breathless and completely unable to remember what he was talking about. "You did that on purpose," Zhelan muttered one evening, his lips swollen, his face flushed as he glared at the smiling regent. "I have no idea what you mean," Wuyong murmured, tracing the line of Zhelan's jaw with a lazy finger. "I am merely showing my deep appreciation for your hard work." "You are a menace." "I am your menace," Wuyong corrected, his dark eyes softening with an affection he reserved only for one person in the entire world. "And you love it." Zhelan sighed, leaning down to press a soft kiss against Wuyong's forehead. He couldn't deny it. He was cursed with honesty, after all. "Yes," Zhelan whispered softly, the candlelight reflecting in his eyes. "Heaven help me, I do." And in the heart of the most dangerous palace in the Empire, a disgraced secretary and a lonely tyrant finally found a truth they could both believe in. If you want the next part, the uncensored continuation, and more unlimited 18+ Ancient Royal BL stories, come join Spicy Ancient BL on Patreon. The link is waiting for you in the description and pinned comment.